Grand Canyon, the complete guide was extremely interesting and full of valuable information. I would not visit the Grand Canyon again without this book. The information contained in this guide will make visiting the Grand Canyon a more fulfilling and enjoyable experience. Hi, I'm Paul from Trending, Who, What, Where, and When. Today I'll be speaking with James Kaiser about his book, Grand Canyon, The Complete Guide. James will be joining us from Colorado near Rocky Mountain National Park, USA. I'll start out by asking you where you would take friends and family when they come to visit you.
There's a couple great things. It's a small town. It's only about 2,000 people, and it's about halfway between Boulder and Rocky Mountain National Park. It's sort of in the foothills of the Rockies. And, it's a small town, but it's got a quaint little downtown. So you can stroll the downtown, check out some great local shops. There's some amazing public parks where you can take kids and there's these rivers that flow right by them. I mean, really just beautiful. And then maybe the most famous thing in town is a bluegrass festival that happens every summer. It's one of the biggest bluegrass festivals in the US.
Actually, that festival had a great website. I went and looked at that, and it looked like they had lots of pictures of different people that played there in the past.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, they get big bluegrass names. If you're into bluegrass, it's a great festival and it's a spectacular location. It's outside, you're surrounded by nature. It's great.
Also, you were talking about the market there, the St. Vrain market.
Yeah, it's just it's the local community market, and it's small, but it's got a really good selection of really high quality stuff. So you can go in and get great deli sandwiches on homemade bread. They bake their own bread. Just a really great spot in town.
You also mentioned Laverne Johnson Park.
Mm-hmm.
That's a place you can go camping.
Yeah, they have designated campsites there. So, you can go there, just walk in for the day and with kids, enjoy the playground or go fishing along the banks of the river. But they also have, oh man, maybe about a dozen or maybe a little more dedicated campsites. A bunch of them are right, near the river. So it's just a great location.
Tell us about your book. How did you get involved in writing this book?
Sure. So I'm going to start at the beginning here. When I graduated from college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't have a plan. So I went back to Maine, where I was born and raised. And I said, you know what? There's not a good guidebook to Acadia National Park, which is right on the coast of Maine, where I had grown up hiking the trails with my parents and, working summer jobs at local restaurants. And I said, I'm going to sit down and just as a fun project, I'm going to do a guide that I would want for the park. And it snowballed into this project that became much bigger than I could have ever imagined. But when the book came out, it was a hit. People loved it. And I thought, well, this is fun. I want to go to other places. And eventually that led me to Grand Canyon, where I did a guide to the whole park.
How long did it take you to do this guide? There's so much, looked like so much research involved.
Definitely. So For the first edition, a little over a year, and that included visiting in all seasons. It included going on a 3-week river trip through the park along the Colorado River, and then sitting down and reading everything I could and researching everything I could about the Grand Canyon, which is quite a bit.
And from what I saw, it looked like you lived in the area or in California, close to the Grand Canyon.
At that point, I was living in California, and I was driving there, and I would spend, a couple weeks at a time. So it was sort of a long distance commute. But it was still just, even that drive going out there is amazing. But spending that time in the park in all those seasons was an extraordinary opportunity.
So you stayed at the park itself for weeks at a time or in the area for weeks at a time.
Exactly. Either camping out or staying in hotels inside or outside the park. Yep.
Okay, so you're very familiar with the surroundings there then.
Oh yeah, yeah. But there's always more to learn as well. I mean, it's really, most people head to one of two areas, the North Rim or the South Rim, and there's, those are the two famous spots. There's 277 miles of river, that stretches out. So most of the Grand Canyon actually doesn't get explored very much, and I'm always looking for new places to visit and things that are a little bit off the beaten path.
Okay, so you would still, even going there now, you would still find things you haven't gone to and haven't seen in the past.
I think you could spend a lifetime exploring Grand Canyon and you would still find new things.
So do people know when they see you there? Do they know who you are?
I know a few people. I know some of the people that work in the park bookstore, and run into some rangers. So yeah, I see some friendly faces. First quote is going to be from the introduction, one of the very first pages. From hiking to biking to river trips, Grand Canyon has it all, but it's an incredibly overwhelming place. This guide breaks it down, shows you the best Grand Canyon has to offer, and equips you with everything you need to make the most of your time in the park. Go for a hike, drive along the rim, or spend the night at a historic lodge. But whatever you do, don't peek over the rim and wonder what to do next. It really sums up a lot of my feelings about the park. Grand Canyon is this grand, epic destination with all these incredible adventures. And yet a lot of people show up, they drive to the rim, they look over, which is an incredible experience, don't get me wrong, but there's so much more to see and do within the Grand Canyon. And it's really one of these places where the more that you put in, the more effort you put in, the greater the reward's going to be. So you can drive up to a rim and up to a viewpoint and look over the canyon, and it'll be a great experience. But if you go on a hike into the canyon, or if you go on a river trip through the canyon, that's when the park really reveals itself. And that's where you're really going to have the most incredible adventures and opportunities, the things that stick with you for a lifetime.
Actually, the last couple times we were there, we saw so many people on the very edge hanging over trying to take pictures.
Right.
I was amazed at the danger we're seemingly in to try and
Yeah.
get.
And not all of them get that shot without incurring some form of injury. Grand Canyon is a place where people can die. It's not Disneyland. People need to be careful and be respectful. But if you treat it with the respect, I've visited many times. I've seen many incredible places, and I've been fine. But a lot of people go there and don't treat it with the reverence that it deserves.
Yeah, the guard railings are there for a reason.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, so this is from the history chapter, early on in the history chapter. The swift decline of the ancestral Puebloans is the Southwest's greatest archaeological mystery. Why would a culture at the height of its prosperity, by many accounts the most advanced civilization north of Mexico, suddenly abandon its settlements? What caused them to leave the Four Corners region they had occupied for over 2,000 years, never to return? So this is a quote. It's an introduction to the ancestral Puebloans, which was one of the native cultures that lived in and around Grand Canyon about 1,000 years ago. And what I like about this quote is that it opens up, one of these fascinating aspects of Grand Canyon that a lot of people miss. It has this incredible and rich native history. People think of it as sort of this postcard view and this geological, like wonderland, and it is. But at the same time, there's some really extraordinary history, some amazing archaeology, and still a lot of mysteries that people are trying to figure out as to what was going on there 1,000 years ago. Um, and even today, the modern tribes that live in the region, the Hopi and the Navajo, this is one of the most culturally fascinating areas in the US. And a lot of guidebooks to the Grand Canyon just glance over that native history. They'll mention it here and there, but they don't really go into it. And to me, it's one of the most fascinating aspects of the park. I mean, it's really just an amazing way to learn about this region in general, and the Grand Canyon in particular. So that's one of the things I always try to do with my guides is I try to make it more than just a list of, well, you can stay at this hotel or you can eat at this restaurant. It's really a learning experience about this place. What is it that makes this so fascinating? What are the stories here behind the scenery? And that's always been my goal with my books.
Such a mystery. It sounds like there's really no explanation what happened to the people that were there.
There's a couple theories, some more prominent than others. Everything from a depletion of natural resources to a great drought to a war with neighboring tribes. There's still a lot that's mysterious about it, and people are doing their best to try to figure out what might have happened here. But that's also what makes it so interesting.
Yeah.
It's not just cut and dry. There are still these mysteries there. And when you go there and see it for yourself, it really puts it in perspective. And, for me, the challenge is how do I fit that into a relatively small space? There's people that write entire books about, just this subject, the ancestral Puebloans. And, if you want to read those books, that's great. If I can interest people in that and, get them to go a little deeper, that's exactly what I want to do. But for me, there's just something about my process of making these books. I really love taking a lot of dense information, condensing it into something that's easy to read, and getting people excited about this stuff.
I was really surprised how much information was in the book that I hadn't seen before. You had
Yeah.
a lot of things in there I hadn't seen, and we've read other things about the Grand Canyon, but just that wasn't brought to the surface.
Yeah. Well, and there's new stuff that's always being discovered, and I need to keep on top of that. But yeah, that's exactly the thing. Most people just go, they look over the rim and they say, well, this is nice. There's a whole hidden story there that's just remarkable.
So you would suggest when people go there, they probably go for 3 or 4 days or even longer.
Oh, sure. You can easily spend, that much time there. Even if you can only visit for a day, it's worth it. But if you can spend a little longer and plan ahead, and do some activities that go sort of beyond the basic sightseeing, you're really going to get more out of it.
You also explained the areas around the Grand Canyon, the dams, all the different aspects that were integrated into or they were put into your book.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, Northern Arizona has got a lot of great stuff. From its native culture to, if you're into astronomy, there's some great sites. There's an amazing observatory in Flagstaff, the Lowell Observatory. There's Meteor Crater, which was this meteor impact site. There's a lot of fascinating stuff around Grand Canyon.
In fact, one of the pictures in your book was talking about that. It showed the stars and it explained that because I guess they had something happen where they got the lights to be toned down in the area so that the stars would be brighter.
Yeah, and actually, lots of parks and towns surrounding parks are doing this. It's what they're doing is trying to reduce light pollution, and light pollution is when you have, electric lights on, and it sort of floods the surroundings, and makes it harder to see the stars. If you think of going to New York City, it's pretty hard to see the stars because there's so much light pollution. And really, all it involves is installing some light fixtures. So instead of the light, sort of going out in all directions, if you just have a light fixture like this, it focuses the light down and it's not polluting the surroundings. And it's fabulous because Grand Canyon is a great place to see the stars. And by reducing the light pollution, it makes it even better.
So you had a 2-page picture in your book that showed the stars. That's an image that you took yourself.
Yeah. Yep.
Was that a difficult image to take?
It's a little tricky. I mean, astrophotography is always a little bit different than regular photography. The thing about that one is I took it at Desert View Watchtower, and it's really about getting that tower in focus because I wanted to have something where you can sort of see the canyon and see something, and then the stars. But really, it was quite a bit of fun. I get to sit on the rim and look at the stars and, take some long exposures and contemplate the universe.
So then you'd be very patient taking the images. You'd invest the time in being there for quite a while.
Oh yeah, and that's true of a lot of images. Yeah, it's a time consuming process, but hey, you get to hang out in a beautiful place for a while. Even if you know nothing about geology, Grand Canyon is still an impressive sight. But take the time to learn about the forces that created it, and you'll look upon the canyon with a fresh set of eyes. What was once amazing will become astounding. What once took your breath away will make your head spin. And so this is from the intro to the geology chapter. Geology is a complex subject, and a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around it. Grand Canyon has a lot of great displays that talk about the geology and explain it. But again, something about geology, I don't know, something clicked with me. I really like imagining the process, and once you can conceptualize the process and remove some of the jargon that geologists like to use, because a lot of times the jargon is very confusing to people that don't know anything about geology. If you can put it in more simple terms, it becomes extraordinarily fascinating. And, I've gotten so many emails from readers who tell me that the geology chapter is their favorite chapter in the book because for the first time, they finally understood the amazing story behind Grand Canyon. And it is an amazing story, and there's also controversy and mysteries there. People aren't entirely sure exactly what happened, and there are competing theories because it really is kind of an odd thing. Why did this giant canyon form here? And really, why did the river cut through sort of a highland area? What's going on there? But once you sort of wrap your head around it and understand it, when you're looking out at the canyon, you're not just looking out at some rocks. I mean, you are looking back in time. You are looking back in the period before the dinosaurs, and in some cases, the period before, much of life. And so when you're staring at that rock, you can try to imagine what was Earth like back before there were flowering plants, back before there were mammals, because that's what you're looking at. You're looking at those rocks. They're buried deep at the bottom of Grand Canyon. The Colorado River is the heart and soul of Grand Canyon. Without it, Grand Canyon would be just another flat stretch of land in northern Arizona. Instead, the river has cut a mile into the surrounding landscape, exposed nearly 2 billion years of Earth history, and flushed out over 1,000 cubic miles of eroded debris. The result is the most impressive natural feature in North America. As stunning as the view is from the rim, the view from the river is even more spectacular. Flowing downstream from Lee's Ferry, just south of the Utah-Arizona border, the Colorado River enters the most scenic stretch of whitewater in America. As the river cascades down a series of thrilling rapids, sheer cliffs rise up thousands of feet on either side. Twisting deep into the heart of Grand Canyon, the river exposes a dazzling natural world filled with towering rock formations, sandy beaches, dark caverns, and sparkling waterfalls. Side canyons spread out in all directions, channeling unlikely streams through parched terrain. As the Colorado River flows around sharp bends, cool canyon shadows mingle with shimmering river light. As the largest river in the Southwest, the Colorado is a river of liquid gold. Its water, delivered via massive aqueducts, allows millions of people to live in the desert and enables farmers to grow billions of dollars of crops year-round. Although plugged by dams and reservoirs along much of its length, the Colorado flows free in Grand Canyon for 277 miles, thrilling river runners who enjoy some of the most spectacular scenery in America. Each year, roughly 25,000 people, less than half of 1% of all park visitors, embark on a river trip through Grand Canyon. That number is strictly limited by the National Park Service to preserve the wilderness experience at the bottom of the canyon. Those lucky enough to witness Grand Canyon from the Colorado River are filled with awe. Physically, the size of Grand Canyon is humbling. Visually, it's one of the most dynamic places in the world, changing with the weather, the seasons, and the time of day. Even seasoned world travelers confess that a river trip through Grand Canyon is one of Earth's most remarkable outdoor adventures.
On the research you did for the book, was most of that done in libraries, or did you purchase books, or was it done online, or just everything?
Well, a lot of books that I purchased, that was back in, what was it, 2005. So there were some online resources, but believe it or not, it was kind of limited in 2005. I went to the park. I, explored their museum, their archaeological artifacts. Obviously, talked with park rangers and read all the displays that are in Grand Canyon. So really, I just try to pull information from wherever I can find it. And sometimes you'll find amazing information in unlikely places, and you have to verify it, obviously. But that's really, I'm just an omnivore. I'm just looking for information wherever I can find it.
So you got, okay, a lot of it being there. And then do you have a lot of technical equipment for the photography? You must have just lots of things you would have to take with you.
Well, it really depends. Obviously, for certain shots, if you can just, drive to a viewpoint and open up the back of your car and pull out lots of gear, it's great to have that available. But there's other cases where if I'm on a river trip for 3 weeks, I got to limit what I can bring, or, backpacking, you're always trying to keep your weight down. So, you got to go with sort of the bare minimum. So it depends on the situation. But there's always sort of a bare minimum of 2 lenses and a light tripod and enough batteries and memory.
Was this the hardest book you've written, or were there others that were even more difficult than this?
Well, I'll tell you, I just finished a new guide to Rocky Mountain National Park. In between COVID and the 3 largest wildfires in Colorado history bearing down on the park, that was a little bit of a challenge. And I also did it carrying a baby on my back, so that made things a little tricky. But as far as the scope of a place, I mean, Grand Canyon's, there's a lot of scope there. There's a lot to investigate. So it was certainly one of the more difficult books to work on. But I'm also on, the, what is it, 8th edition now. So continuously refining the books and picking up new things here and improving things there.
I was amazed. You went back in time and wrote about the early explorers there, and you even had contemporary information about the thing they built out where you walk out over the canyon and look down. So you've got,
Skywalk, yeah.
yeah, from the newest things to the oldest things.
Yeah, from John Wesley Powell to Neil Armstrong, walking across the skywalk.
But would you like to tell us a little bit about the awards that you've won?
When the first edition came out, it won the Benjamin Franklin Award for the Best Color Travel Guide and the Independent Publisher Award for Best Travel Guide. I was, I think, 26 at the time, and it was really, an honor to be, that young and get those awards. I think I might have been the youngest recipient for those two. And it was amazing. It was great. They had the award ceremony in New York City. It was fun to go there and see friends and hang out. But really, I mean, for me, what I'm most proud of is, not just leaving the book there and saying, okay, well, I wrote this book in 2005 and there's nothing more to write. It's an ongoing process. There's a lot that's happened, in the Grand Canyon in the past 15 years. And I'm really proud of not just, sort of sitting on my laurels and leaving it be. Like, I'm always trying to make the book even better.
So you must go back about every 2 years and revise it.
Yeah, it's about that. That's about the schedule that I'm on.
Yeah, that's good. Because I've seen a lot of travel books that, well, like you're saying, they write it and then they sort of just leave it, and
Yeah.
it isn't updated.
Yeah, I mean, A, I don't think that's, the best way to do a travel guide. And B, I get to miss out on visiting the Grand Canyon regularly.
So tell us about all of these other books you've written. You've written a number of books, travel guides.
Yeah, so I think 7 now. So Acadia was the first one that I did in Maine. After that, I did Joshua Tree. Grand Canyon was the third. Then I did Yosemite. At that point, I was 30 years old and in a position where I could sort of live where I wanted to live. And I thought, hey, I want to check out living in a foreign country. So I went to Costa Rica. I lived there for a couple of years. I did a guidebook to Costa Rica. That's actually where I met my wife.
Okay.
And then after that, I came back, and Costa Rica was fun. I had a great time. It's an amazing place, but I really felt like national parks were kind of my calling. So I came back. I did a guide to Zion, and then it'll come out later this summer, but Rocky Mountain National Park is the newest.
Could you tell us a little bit about your national park slideshow presentation?
Sure. So in 2016, it was the centennial of the National Park Service. And I decided, they also, at the same time, they created this program called Every Kid in a Park, where they give every fourth grader in the US a free year-long pass to all the national parks in the US to get them
Oh,
excited about national parks. And I thought, wow, this is a great program. I'd love to put something together and go to my old school and some places like around Maine where I grew up and do some presentations about Acadia National Park and the National Park Service. Because when I was growing up, it was there. It was something that was always there. I kind of took it for granted, and I wanted to show these kids, hey, I'm somebody who's been around the world. I've visited all these places, and just so you know, you have one of the most amazing places in the world in your own backyard. And the reason it's protected and we can enjoy it is because of the National Park Service. So I gave these slideshow presentations to fourth graders, really sort of a simple breakdown of what the National Park Service is, its history, why it's important, really hoping to inspire future generations to become good stewards of the national parks.
and all of that's on your website too. That's clearly.
I have some information about that on my website. Yeah.
So do you have any advice for new writers that you would, any suggestions you would make?
So my advice is write, write, write. Really, writing is a craft, in my opinion. It's not something that anyone is born with. I mean, maybe there's the rare, genius who can just comes out in the womb and is able to, string beautiful grammatical sentences together. But certainly for me, it's been a process. It's something that I'm always trying to improve. I feel like there's always a way that you can learn to write better. And so just the more you do it, the better you're going to get, and the more you can sort of start to organize your own thoughts and figure out how to prepare things to write better in your own head.
So when you, like in your earlier books that you would be writing for a year, would you have anything that you would be checking while you're doing, or you would just write for a year and at that point have it checked and looked at? Or would you have
I
checkpoints?
mean, generally my process, I go out, I gather all the information I can, then I sort of sit down and pull it all together. And then I have it fact check. I mean, people at the park look at it. I have editors look at it. Sometimes I seek out specialists. There was a geology professor and an ecology professor at the University of Colorado that helped me with my most recent book. So always looking for, input. And really, I love it when people, take a look at something and say, hey, I don't think this works, or this is, I didn't get this. I didn't understand this. I do my best, but until other people read it, you never know where you might have not been as clear as you could be, or presented something better.
I would think with the amount of research you could do in one year that you'd also have such a huge amount of information, you'd have to do a lot of editing to trim it back down to around 300 pages.
A huge amount. That's one of the biggest things is, deciding what are you going to remove. There's a phrase, I think, among screenwriters, kill your babies. And it's tough. Sometimes I write stuff that I find stuff that's, fascinating and amazing, but it just doesn't, it would be a better book if I didn't include that information. And it's tough, but that's what you got to do. You got to be your own worst editor.
And then do all your travel guides, do they all have about 100 to 150 images in them?
Yeah, generally, sort of a ballpark estimate, but the photos are a big reason why the books are as popular as they are,
Yeah, I would
because
agree. Yeah.
especially for someplace like a national park that you're going for its natural beauty, you want to see what's out there. And that was really from the beginning. I thought, these other guidebooks, they don't have a whole lot of photos.
Mhm.
And I wish if I could design my perfect guidebook, it would have lots of photos. So that's what I did.
Well, to give people, I think, the incentive to maybe walk the distance to go see some of the things when they see how pretty it is in the image, as
Definitely.
opposed to just
Yeah. I have to say it's been a pleasure talking to you, and
two.
the Grand Canyon, it really is. I know a lot of people, it's almost like, oh, that's something like Disneyland, or Graceland, or it's one of those things on your checklist of like, famous places in the US. It's so much more than that. And honestly, I think every American should visit it, and not just go to the rim, like I said, and then peer on out, but really take a little more time, a little more planning, just a little bit. All you need is a little bit of planning, and you'll have a much richer experience.